Hey, party people. Happy Thursday. Today's Thursday. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Plenty of news in the women's hockey space. We're going to talk about some of the recent news and then throw it back to season 1 of the National Women's Hockey League. My name is Erica L. Ayala, your founder of Black Rosie Media and one of your co-hosts of the Founding Four podcast, a podcast, of course, that has been covering the National Women's Hockey League since Mike Murphy and I founded the Founding Four. I want to say that was around season 3, probably 3. But I hope your Thursday is going well. We are, like I said, going to get started with some PWHL news and then get into our WoHo retro. But first, let me bring in Angelica Rodriguez. Hey.
What up, boo?
You know, living life.
Oh, same.
Yep. So yeah, I just did our quick little intro here. Excited to do our WoHo retro. We're gonna talk about season 1 of the National Women's Hockey League. But first we got to talk about the PWHL. So we have a handful of teams now. Over half of the teams have announced some of their players. Signing that stood out to you the most?
I mean, if we're being real, there really weren't any surprises. I did kind of like the Aaron Frankel signing. Out of am I wrong? Did Boston or Minnesota sign her? Boston did. Okay, that's what I thought. I do like that signing. But I mean, overall, I think the overarching thing here with this like free agency is that there really haven't been any surprises. So like, I'm seeing the rumors and I'm like, yeah, that checks out. And then I'm seeing the official announcements and then they match the rumors and I'm like, yeah, that checks out. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not asking if there were any surprises, especially
no.
A lot of the news, from the Jeff Merricks of the world. But yeah, what stood out to you?
Yeah, no, but even with that, I think it's just like because of that, none of the signings really stand out that much to me. I don't think. I mean, it's a solid group for each team that has been announced so far. Like I said, I'm a little surprised that goalies have been signed this quickly. I do think that, with the wealth of talent in the goalie pool, I'm a little surprised. I thought that maybe they would have waited till the draft to really nail those down, but I am excited. I'm excited to see Emmerich Mashmeyer signed. I'm excited to see Aaron Frankel signed. I'm excited to see Amrene Debian signed. All three of those goalies have a lot of experience behind them, a lot of talent, and I'm a goalie lover. Y'all already know. So what also stood out to me in terms of absences, other than I think Lee Steckline, I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot on the blue line.
Well, we got Megan Keller
as well,
and then Renata Fast.
Oh, for some reason I thought Renata Fast was a forward. I don't know why.
Is it Renata Fast? I'm pretty sure because Brianne Jenner forward, Emily Clark forward, and as you mentioned, Emrance Mashmeyer goalie. Yeah. That's Ottawa. Then you have Megan Keller, Hillary Knight, and Aaron Frankel. So that's goalie forward D. Then for Minnesota, Lee Steckline, Kelly Panic, Kendall Coyne, Schofield. So a defender and 2 forwards. Keller's best skill is not defense. Yeah. So yeah, we do. And Renata Fast, I'm pretty sure plays D. It's because it's Blair Turnbull, Renata Fast, and Sarah Nurse. So Blair's not a. She's not a
Blair is definitely a forward. That
I'm pretty sure Renata Fast is it.
Okay, she is defense. I don't know why I had it in my head that she was a center for some reason. But with that being said, I think it's good representation at all three lines of the ice, at least all three zones. You know, I don't know. I think it's just to be expected at this point. You know, I think that the draft will be really interesting. That's really what I'm looking forward to be honest with you, is the draft. You
Yeah, I
know,
think for me, I kind of disagree with you. And it's something that came up on the Minnesota call regarding goalies because someone asked Natalie Darwitz if, she had any concerns about or where she was kind of strategizing when it comes to picking a goalie, because obviously they have the first pick, but
right,
then with the snake draft, they won't pick until there's a little ways for them before
right.
they pick. They have back-to-back
12.
picks. Yeah, I think
Right.
she said 11, 12, something
Yeah.
like that. So, I think, I guess you can see it a few different ways. If she feels that she can either get a goalie at 1 or 11 and 12,
Mm-hmm.
then sure, she's going to want to lock in like she did. I think Lee Steckline, no brainer. I think
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, I mean, Kendall Coyne Schofield has also played in Minnesota
Right.
before. And I asked Lee Steckline about that specifically. And then Kelly Pennick grew up in Minnesota, so she
Yeah.
also touched on the Whitecaps. Which I appreciated. I was doing a bunch of interviews today, so I missed Montreal altogether, that press conference, and
Right.
I was in and out for Boston. But I can say from the conferences that I was on, I think the North American. Canada and U.S. are North American. The United States, the U.S. markets are a little bit more amenable to kind of opening up to the recent history of women's
Right.
hockey, which of course includes the NWHL/PHF.
Yeah.
But we are going to talk about the not so recent history because we're taking it all the way back to season numero uno for the National Women's Hockey League. So we will have a chance to talk more about the
Right.
PWHL and look out for some things that I have coming down the pike. But
Yeah.
we're gonna get into our Rojo retro.
I'm just really amused because this is the second time that like we've had that whole Canada North America thing today at my job. Somebody was saying, "Oh, well, they said North, like it was just, we're doing training, and one of our vendors is from Canada, and my colleague is like, well, it said North American on the website." I'm like, well, think about where Canada is.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's fine. It's fine. It's been a long week. There's been a lot flying around, but
yeah,
I'm excited for this.
sure.
I'm excited to go down memory lane a little bit.
That's it. We're walking down memory lane.
Yes.
So let's get into it. So first question that we have, and if you are watching, pop in the chat and let us know. I know some people have engaged with us on social media, which has been awesome. But when did you first hear of the NWHL? Like, where were you? What were you doing? What did you know about it?
I mean, I first heard about it, I think through Twitter. I think that was kind of where the first whispers were. And I saw the NWHL, then NWHL accounts. Hi, Beth. I saw the then accounts. It was pretty bare bones, but I was hearing whispers, and I kind of took it with a grain of salt at the time. Just because, again, it's one of those things that it's like, there's always an idea, but is it really going to come to fruition? And then all of a sudden it became a thing. And I was like, whoa, like, I'm like, this is a thing. And there's 4 teams and one of them's going to be in Buffalo. And I was really excited at that time. I was still fairly new I was only like a couple of seasons into covering women's hockey. I've been covering since 2012 on Hockey Wilderness. I was covering NCAA hockey for Minnesota. And then I also was doing CWHL hockey for Matchsticks and Gasoline, the old SB Nation Calgary Flames blog. I was covering the Calgary Inferno. And so when I heard about a league in the United States, I was excited, and even more so to see that they were going to be playing practically in my backyard. So to see that come alive and to see all of that, I was like, of course I want to be a part of it. I want to cover this league. I want to cover the Buffalo team because it's super exciting. And, there were some big names attached, and there was some really, really exciting, both local and, national and international talent. Let's be real, Buffalo is basically annexed by Canada at this point. But, there was a good mix of talent, and there were some national team players. So, I just thought it was really, really exciting. And obviously, the rest is pretty much history,
Yeah, I see Maddie saying she followed the mass exodus of Boston Blades players. So y'all are way ahead of the game for me. I didn't even really start paying attention to pro hockey, even on the men's side, until my sister watched the 2014 Olympics, and we always watched Winter Olympics as a family growing up. So then once we were in college doing our own thing, we still kind of individually kept watching. And my sister Jessie, shout out to Jessie.
Jessie.
She's really got into the Olympic tournaments, hockey tournaments for the men's and women's side, which were both really dramatic that year, from what I understand. And then we were at a preseason game, Islanders Rangers at Barclays.
Oh, wow.
And because I was like, all right, if you're into sports now, I don't know a dang thing about hockey, but I know about sports. I'll help you do the sports thing. And we were at that game sitting down, and I was telling her, I was like, listen, I don't care what you heard, but you have to pick a New York team. You can't be like a Mets and a Yankees fan. So I'm sure it probably works the same for hockey. Like, pick one of these teams and then we'll ride with that. And then she was like, well, hey, there's this women's hockey league that's starting. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, she told me a little bit about the CWHL because she became a big Julie Chu fan.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
The Canadian de Montreal.
And she was hoping that maybe Julie Chu would play in this new league. That was really what she was hoping for. But she mentioned that the New York team was going to be playing in Brooklyn. We were in Brooklyn at the time. And I was like,
oh yeah.
And she's like, yeah, they're going to be the Riveters. And so it wasn't this exact logo. They switched it up a wee bit. And so especially like the Connecticut logo is super different. She was like, yeah, would you want to go to these games? She's like, it's women's hockey. I was like, I don't care. Like, I watch women's sports. Like, let's go. And we went to the first game, just bought tickets for that game. That was the game. And we'll get into it, where Boston was late, like several hours late. And we had a good, like, everyone was still having a good time. And after that, we became season ticket holders, because it was just like, yeah, let's do this. And then, so Beth was waving to us. Hey, Beth. It became one of the voices that, at least in that first season, that I would read and kind of follow. You mentioned social media earlier. I wasn't really into social media at all. I think I technically had a Twitter account, but mostly used it for work stuff. And so then it was through this league and following hockey that I kind of got into social media and got into hockey. And as they say, the rest is history. But those are our stories. Let us know in the chat, how did you learn about the National Women's Hockey League? Did you go to any games? I kind of alluded to this already, but let's talk about this first game that you either watched, Angelica, or that you went to.
It was the home opener. It was the Boston Pride coming to Buffalo to play the Buffalo Beauts. That was yeah, it was a game, and obviously, I mean, the Beauts came in kind of as the underdogs. It was still, it was a situation where that first season, there were a number of players that came to the team late due to some visa issues, and it was a little bit. we weren't sure what was going to happen. But those players not being on the team allowed for the emergence of one Kelly Stedman, who was then a practice player for the Buttes. And she, in fact, scored the first ever Buffalo Buttes goal. I think it was a 3-1 loss, if I'm not mistaken.
Close. It was 4-1.
4-1?
Yeah.
Whatever. It was still a loss. But Kelly Stedman did score the first goal, and that was the beginning of a very, very long and still going strong love affair with the play of Kelly Stedman.
Yes.
She is literally one of my favorite players from that era of the NWHL.
I mean, we could have a whole podcast on Kelly Stedman alone. But let's backtrack a little, because there's been a lot of chatter with the PWHL, with who signed first, not just for each individual team, but overall. And, you know, there's been, I believe they're saying that Kelly Panic is the first player to sign overall, even though it was Ottawa who announced their players first. So Kelly Panic, it would appear, is going to enter company with who from the National Women's Hockey League?
I believe that's Megan Duggan, is it not? No?
No.
Oh, God, I know it's a national team player. It can't be Kelly Stack.
Is a national team player, but they don't play for a North American team. That's right. Janine Weber.
Okay.
J9. Janine Weber signed the first ever NWHL contract.
Got you. I think Duggan was probably one of the first Buttes, and that's why that sticks in my head, because I was very much yes, Janine Weber. And again, Janine Weber, one of those players that's just become a legend in women's hockey and pro women's hockey. Just such a solid all-around player.
Is a national team player, but not for North America.
And a bit of a journeyman, you know, journeywoman, yes. Played the rounds with a few teams.
We'll get to that.
Yes,
we'll get to that, because we're gonna go through why the heck not. What else do we have to do? Let's through all 8 seasons. But yes, she played for the Riveters, and she's known for a few things. So if you want to get your trivia together, as Madison says, we're gonna get you ready for women's hockey trivia. Janine Weber, first player to sign an NWHL contract. Now, we started our WoHo retro with the NWHL, but we could easily do it for the CWHL as well. Sure. And the season prior to coming over to the Riveters, exactly, Madison knows where I'm going with this, had her hockey stick in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it was interesting because one of the first things that I learned in reading about these players, again, became a Riveters fan, so of course I knew Janine Weber, but I was like, wait, so they put her stick in the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is freaking awesome. But then there was like this whole conversation, because she was like, okay, but like, what am I supposed to play with now? Like, who's going to buy me another stick? Yeah. So that was really interesting. But Janine Weber also played for the Riveters, and probably most well known for, I'll say, on the opening game. I mentioned that Boston was like 3 hours late to this game against the Riveters home opener, and Janine Weber was juggling oranges to keep the crowd entertained. There were all kinds of things that were happening at Aviator, but nobody left. And that's when I was like, wow, this is really something. I didn't know Hillary Knight from Ludmila Belyakova. Like, I genuinely could not tell you the difference between those two players if you put them in a lineup. I knew nothing about hockey. And just to see that hockey fans were so dedicated that we literally just waited for Boston to show up. And then I tell this as a part of my history all the time, Angelica, but one of the first things that I noticed when Boston was warming up was number 10. I was like, the one thing I do know about hockey is that hockey players sometimes like block the puck. And I was like, you mean to tell me that these here riveters are supposed to stand in front of her shot? Like, I'm not doing it. There's no way. There's no way I'm doing it. And then I looked closer and I was like, yo, I think she's black. That's the one and only Blake Bolden. Now, Blake Bolden goes down in history as the first black player to play in the National Women's Hockey League. Worth noting that Cherise Stewart played for the Riveters. She did not suit up, though, for that first game. So, and Boston, to your point, had already played. So yes, Blake freaking Bolden, like she is walking history. That game did not go well. I couldn't remember the exact score, but I was like, I'm pretty sure Boston scored 7. Yeah, they scored 7-1. Now, I want to say this is a good question. I believe Ammerman 8-1. Was it 8 or they say Wikipedia says 7? Either way, at least 7 goals were scored or 8 goals altogether. I believe Brooke Ammerman scored the first ever goal for the Riveters. But another trivia question, Angelica, who scored the first ever goal in league history?
Was that just Koizumi?
Yes, that's right.
Jessica Koizumi. Then I believe the captain of the Connecticut Whale, who, God, the Connecticut Whale that season were something else.
Pun intended.
Oh,
ew. Pun intended. Okay, so you mentioned Megan Duggan, but technically another trivia. Kelly Stack, highest payer in the league that year at $26K as memory serves, which is the exact amount. Actually, I think 27. It's either 26 or 27K is what Daryl Watts made for joining the Toronto 6 halfway. I was like, girl.
Times changed drastically.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Season 8 will have its time eventually. Okay, so as you mentioned, the Connecticut Whale, the Connecticut Whale were just buzzing on all cylinders. I forget where it's from. Maybe it's from Take the Ice. I don't know. But there's a quote from Hillary Knight, who did play for the Boston Pride. I was blown away when someone doing data analytics was like, wait, Hillary Knight played in the NWHL? And I was like, fam,
dear God.
Fam, what are we doing? How do we not know this? And that's why we're doing Woho Retro, because we do not we do not want to lose the history.
Absolutely not.
But at one point, I remember her quoted as saying, like, can someone just beat them already? Like, because they just were just dominating. At the same time, their team was completely falling apart. They switched GMs. They switched coaches. I mean, there was just a lot going on for that team. And as a matter of fact, I remember when they suffered their first loss, Connecticut, that was to the Boston Pride, who would eventually be the number 1 seed. And that was the game. It was in Connecticut. I'm just saying that because it's fun. At Chelsea Piers. And do you know who suited up for that game? Because it was during a time where national team players were away. Can you this is another throwback.
I'm going to be really honest. I most likely don't know.
So she now works for the American Hockey League, was general manager and president at one time for the Boston Pride. Haley Moore. Yes, Madison is crushing it. Maddie,
She definitely is. I am
history.
Embarrassed, but
knows
it
his
is what it
history.
is.
I mean, that's why we're doing this. This is all fun. This is like a trivia / what the heck was going on kind of evening. So,
Girl, wait till we get to season 4, because I ain't gonna know jack shit.
not I have one hobby. Season 4. Oh man, we're gonna have to bring on some special guests for that one.
We might, because that's just full disclosure. In 2018, I did suffer a loss and I did step away from women's hockey. So, not to get ahead of ourselves, but that will likely be the one where I know the absolute least, because I did step away from the sport for a little bit.
Yeah,
but
we'll get there. We've got plenty of time. But yes, Haley Moore suited up for that game, and a shorthanded Boston Pride team handed the Connecticut Whale their first loss of the season. And then basically, as I'm sure Maddie can remember, because I mean, speaking to a house divided between the Pride and Whale, but Boston really got things going. But not before. But not before they lost not once, but twice to the basement dwellers, New York Riveters, which was extremely exciting. Being able to see like one of their first wins was against Boston, but all of a sudden Boston is on a heater. Also worth noting, with we bring it up because it's a part of the history, but that was the year that the NHL invited the National Women's Hockey League and the Canadian Women's Hockey League to both participate in the Winter Classic, which was at Gillette Stadium. That's where the Patriots play, right? Yeah, sure, cool. We'll go with that. Well, sure. We're the boys throw the pigskin.
The hand egg.
Another fun trivia: Blake Bolden scored the only goal for the Boston Pride in that game, unfortunately, Dana Lang got injured and suffered a spinal injury.
Yeah.
There was a lot of conversation. First of all, the first thing that was upsetting was that we couldn't watch the game. There were a few people, bless their hearts, that were trying to stream it. Like, I'm pretty sure Periscope was like a thing back then.
Periscope was a thing, and I remember using it liberally during season 1 for Buttes games, because we unfortunately did not have very reliable streaming at that point. I believe the games were being streamed on YouTube.
They were.
But it was just not, it wasn't up to the level that it had been, before the PHF got bought out. So yeah, I remember listening to that. I believe some people were trying to stream it on Periscope. Some people were trying to do audio feeds for it. I remember listening to one of those audio feeds, and unfortunately, the ice was not great. There were concerns about it for a while, because it had been unseasonably warm, and unfortunately, I mean, the sun was hitting the ice, making it extremely soft, and it just was one of those things where Dana went into the boards at just the right angle, and unfortunately, that was kind of the end of her playing career. It is a dark spot in the season. We can't ignore that. I think it kind of was a culmination of a lot of the kind of underlying things that were going on behind the scenes, because I think that, and this is again another part of the history too, right? We can't ignore that, with a league starting out, with any league starting out, but especially with the NWHL in season 1, it was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of fly by wire. It was a lot of let's, try to put on the best product we can, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
unfortunate on so many levels. Beth
Right.
saying that was my first real press box. I ate everything. Ooh, you have to let us know in the chat what was the
Yes,
spread, because I
because
feel like press
girl,
boxes.
when I saw the press box at the Jets game, what was it, a couple weeks ago, and the lunches that the media got in that press box,
I don't
I
know.
was like, I should jump over to the NFL because goddamn.
Not even a good buffet, and I love me some food. But anyway, yeah, so just okay, more trivia, and I did not know this more this one more recently, but I mentioned Blake Bolden scored in that game. Let's take it back. Le Canadiens from the CWHL, the Montreal team played the NWHL. I think that was the NHL's way of saying, like, we're not going to pick sides, so we're going to invite both of them. And so
Yeah.
funny story. I'm assuming that I don't remember completely right now, but I'm assuming that between national team players being away and just things seemed to come together, as I recall, pretty last minute. So there were some
Yes.
players that filled in that were not actually on the Boston Pride, that played on the Boston Pride for that particular game. But it was a Boston Pride member. It was Blake Bolden who recorded the only goal for them late in the second period. But a player that recently played for Montreal in the Premier Hockey Federation scored the first goal for Montreal.
I believe that is one Miss Anne-Sophie Betty, if I do recall. Please tell me I'm wrong. What?
Wrong.
Good God. Who else was on that team?
Wrong. Not Anne-Sophie Betty.
I mean, she would have been my guess regardless because, I mean, when doesn't she score, honestly?
Truly. No, it was Kim Deschênes. I never say that right.
Wow. Okay, Kim
Yes.
Deschênes.
Yes.
Okay.
Deschênes. Yes. That's who scored. I recently,
Fair
that's
play to
very
her.
recent history that I realized. I also didn't really ever like that, never sunk in. Like I was like, I don't care who scored for Montreal. Also, you know why? Because there's this fantastic like stick taps to whoever captured this, but you see Blake Bolden, she passes it. I'm almost positive it was Rachel Yannis, but she passes it, and then you see her like crashing towards the net, just like skating her little heart out. And then as soon as she like gets to peak stride, the video goes slow-mo, and you see her start to like stop and skid on the ice, put her stick down. Pass comes in, tips it in, just beautiful. And they caught the goal, or they edited the goal, but it looked like it was like an app, you know, like one of those things. They caught the goal in slow-mo, and I have seen that video numerous buku times. It's just fantastic. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Question: Boston couldn't play practice players, I guess. Well, remember, Dena Lang practice player that year.
She was.
So it was a scheduling conflict. Right. Again, also the holidays. So they had to go with who was around and who could suit up. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was quite a few players who I remember. It was basically skeleton rosters, and like we said, it was just a lot of last minute logistics being thrown together.
Yeah, Bray Ketchum played for Montreal in that game.
I remember.
Sure. I want to say Megan Farleman also suited up. I'm wearing a Megan Farleman jersey right now. This is my first ever NWHL jersey. Megan Farleman. So one of the first. So that's exactly. Bray Ketchum, we just talked about that. Yes, exactly. Okay, so but around that time, between Dena's injury, the national team players coming back, Buffalo started to get hot. The Riveters were like, maybe we'll, not lose every game. But Boston really started to separate from the field.
Yes.
And ultimately, the way the season ended, They played 18 games in that first season. Each team played 18 games. The Boston Pride ended up usurping Connecticut for the number one spot with a 14-3 record with one OT loss for 29 points. And the Whale, the aforementioned Whale, went 13-5, no OT losses, 26 points.
Yes.
Then you had the Buttes,
Yes.
5-9.
Yes.
4 OT losses. 4 OT losses.
Yeah, and I believe at least one of those, if not multiple, were to the Whale, who they then, I don't want to get it too far ahead because postseason is right there, but it always seemed like the Buttes were kind of on the cusp of beating that team. I remember one of those games being an unbelievable, I think they came back from like 5-1 to push it to overtime, tied at 6-6. Megan Duggan was a humongous part of that, as was, I believe, Emily Falzer. And then I believe they lost.
Woo!
Oh, yeah. Emily Falzer, now Emily Matheson, of course. Again, first, I believe she was first captain of the Buttes as well. Unreal. I mean, the Buttes were one of those teams that was able to get hot at just the right time. And I think that they actually found a really prime postseason opponent in the Whale because they were starting to figure out the Whale. They were starting to really
comeback kids.
Yes.
I love that, Daisy. Hey, Daisy. Yeah. I just saw
Daisy.
You hit us up on Twitter as well.
Yeah, and that was definitely season 1, I believe. That was when we still had 3-game series, or best of 3 series, I should say, throughout the postseason, including the Isabel Cup final, which honestly I think is the best way to determine it. I love best of.
Well, like you said, we'll get there. But I want to stick with the overtime scenario. So looking per Wikipedia, one of the first overtime games that we saw was a 7-6 game against the Buffalo Buttes and Connecticut Whale. Connecticut wins that game. That was on November 22nd.
Yep.
That was also the day that New York beat Boston. So just so you know, that was
probably why I don't remember it.
The second overtime game, December 6th, 2-3 win Connecticut over Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Then on December 13th, a 4-3 win Connecticut over New York. Mm-hmm. Those were all shootouts. And then, or at least per Wikipedia, January 3rd, 4-3 Buffalo over Boston in overtime. Mm-hmm. Then January 17th, Buffalo versus New York, 6-5 for Buffalo in a shootout. And then February 7th, overtime, 3-2 Connecticut once again over Buffalo.
Yep.
That very next weekend on February 14th. Oh, I remember this one. Valentine's Day, New York Riveters over the Buffalo Buttes in a shootout. I remember that one for sure. And then on March 11th, Boston over Buffalo in overtime, which of course is in the Isabel Cup finals, plural. But again, so drama. Comeback kids. I think, Buffalo and the Riveters also played some like gritty games, as I like to say, that were brought to you by Crime Mob and their greatest hit, Nuck If You Buck.
If you buck. Nuck if you buck.
Nuck if you buck.
All right. Let me not. Okay.
Let's go. Honestly, season 1 was a picture perfect example of why playoffs should be a series. Yes, and since we're here, because I do want to get into some other drama, but like we've all alluded to it, so we might as well just stay here, and then we'll backtrack. And I'm gonna leave this to you, Buffalo expert. expert to talk about the chicken head, among other things.
The
We got
chicken head.
the chicken head we have to talk about, and the big donut. So we've got to talk about that. AKA, I mean, put it in the chat. If you know what we're talking about, you know the event, you know the game we're talking about, just put it in the chat. I feel like we're all speaking the same language. But okay, make a case for why you agree or disagree with Maddie here. Why was season 1 a perfect example of why the playoffs should be a series?
I mean, it just proved that, first of all, a series is more hockey, and we all love more hockey, especially postseason hockey. You know, there's something about postseason hockey that it's just, no matter the league, no matter who's playing, it just seems to be so much more intense. Everything is magnified. And not only that, but it just really kind of proved that any team at any time can beat any other team. I don't think anybody was really expecting Buffalo to do what they did against Connecticut, but they did. And a big part of that was why they, you know, won, is because they had 3 shots at it. You know, Connecticut did take that first game. And then Buffalo kind of took over from there. And once they got, you know, smelled that blood in the water, they didn't let go. And that is a huge part of it, is that, you know, it gives the lower seeds a shot. Yes, at playing spoiler. And I think that, you know, that was echoed again. I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but I think that was echoed again with the way that playoffs were a series in season 8 with Minnesota.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well,
yeah,
the semifinals, but
yes,
I
yes.
digress.
Just
But hey, Edward, thanks for joining us. And so we're talking about season 1 of the National Women's Hockey League. Just so you're brought up to speed, the National Women's Hockey League rebranded as the Premier Hockey Federation. And just this past off season, the Premier Hockey Federation was acquired. It was bought out by the ownership group that now is creating the new Women's Hockey League, the Professional Women's Hockey League. So to answer your question, that's it did not close, it was acquired. And the owners of the PHF decided not to use that branding or any of those logos, and to start a new 6-team league. So that's kind of where we're at. But feel free to ask other questions. We're gonna more casually talk about season 1 of the National Women's Hockey League, but we're always happy to answer your questions. But yeah, I think that as someone who again came into this season not knowing anything really about hockey except for the Mighty Ducks, I was watching the WNBA for years, and I just assume, yeah, you always have series, because after this hockey league, that's when I started watching the NWSL. So I didn't even really have any baseline, I guess, other than, and not even in college. Well, not college. And any of the college sports that I watched, they were always series. Like I was watching, you know, the softball World Series, college baseball World Series. And then, I mean, you know, March Madness is a very unique style of postseason play, if you will. But yeah, I didn't really have a baseline for there not being. So I was very confusion as to why we only got a 3-game series, because I mean, meanwhile, the National Hockey League starts round 1 with 7 games. Like, anybody wants that. Who wants
Hey, I want that. I want that.
That's
I want that.
Because then by the time, obviously at least 2 of those teams are going to make it all the way, but those teams are dog tired.
Oh yeah.
They're like, they've got bandages on their hands. Half of them are concussed. I'm just like, it's too long. It's too long. I don't want it. But anyway, I do wish we had a series. And let's talk about a series. I thought it was hilarious in retrospect, which is what this entire live stream is about, that the Riveters were so like they were talking such a big game with talking about, listen, it's a 3-game series. We beat Buffalo. Well, they did also beat Buffalo, but we beat the Boston Pride twice in the regular season. All you have to do is win 2. And I was like, bless your hearts. That's exactly what you have to say. And then the
Yeah.
games came and it was just like, wah, 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 wah.
What happened though? I mean, the Riveters are always, I think that they were that team that always made it extremely difficult to play against, just because, you know, they may not be the fastest, they may not be the most skilled, they may not have been the team that was always going to win, but they were the team that afterward you were like, Jesus,
Yeah.
like I need an ice pack and a long 10-hour rest. Like they're just one of those teams, and I think that's why they endeared themselves to so many people, including, you know, like Beth said, they're the only team with no Team USA members.
Right.
You know, they've always had a little bit more of a. The dynamic there is so weird because, you know, they are that team that kind of was the blue collar. I think them.
For sure.
You know,
or the lunch pail team,
yeah,
right?
You know, even more so than Buffalo, because I do believe that, you know, while Buffalo did have that kind of aspect, they also did have a little bit more finesse, and they did have some national team pull. But
not the beer league team. Way harsh, Ty. Way harsh.
Way harsh.
but also, like, a decent amount of the Riveters players played on Danny Ryland's beer league team, and she was not only the commissioner of the league, but she also happened to be the general manager of the Riveters. So, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it hurt.
that's what the dynamic is that I'm talking about, is that, you know, they were that kind of that blue collar mentality, but they also they were the one team that was directly connected to the commissioner. So
for better or worse.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was very interesting. But, you know, I do give them credit. They were able to really build a brand. I think that they also, you know, had, again, some of the coolest jerseys. I'm not gonna lie. You know, when I got my then girlfriend into hockey, she loves Rosie the Riveter. She fell in love with, you know, the Riveters logo.
We'll get to this in season 3, but anyway.
Girl, Buffalo did it first. But anyway.
Okay, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about my broadcast. Thank you very much.
But yeah, I mean,
oh my gosh, that's right.
Yes.
Jenny Scriven.
Yes. So I do give credit there. You know, the Riveters were kind of that team that had to kind of work their way up. I don't think it was much of a surprise that, unfortunately, they didn't fare as well against some of those other teams. But, you know, again, they eventually got there, but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. That's for season 3.
Yes, we've got more. We've got more. Okay. I see Daisy on Ice has entered the chat, and games at Aviator were absolutely lit. We were sitting in bleachers. We were hella loud.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I made a bunch of friends. Hello, Daisy. I mean, I made a bunch of friends in season 1. Just watching the Riveters. That's when I first met Mike Murphy, and I don't know if I technically met Dan Rice until preseason season 2, because after the Isabel Cup finals, things got switched over to New Jersey.
Yeah. And I mean, as somebody who, I mean, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I've been to Aviator as an athlete. I have taken that bus route to Aviator to, you know, play and to practice. And I was so excited to see that they were making roots in Brooklyn. So to see it then move to Jersey was, you know, a little bit of a heartbreaker. I'm not gonna lie.
We'll get to that.
You know, but to have it in Brooklyn for that first season was really, really special.
Yes, it was also at the end of the planet in Brooklyn, but, you know.
damn near Queens, but
like my sister and I were not living together at the time. She was in Harlem and I was up in Westchester, and I would like be so tired because we'd have a post-game routine where we would usually go eat at this place in Brooklyn. And then by the time it was time to get home, because we would chat with the players after, I was so ready to be like, all right, tuck and roll. You got to get out this car. Like, I'm tired. I gotta go. I gotta go. But one of my there were so many memorable moments for the Riveters, and I obviously could go on and on and on. There was the Sun game. There was the first home win, and that was Sydney Kidd. If I'm not mistaken, that was like her first or second game. Where because she was late to the team. I think it was also visa, some visa holdups. But let's talk about some other memorable moments in the league in the regular season before we go all the way live with playoffs. Because I mean, do you want to call it an upset? I don't know. We'll get there. But okay, I think one of them happened in Buffalo, and we've alluded to it. Blizzard be damned. The National Women's Hockey League still held its inaugural All-Star game. I probably
that weekend
in the closet somewhere.
That weekend was insane. Let me tell you about that weekend, because this was before driving Ange. So I had to take my happy ass all the way to Toronto, because this was the weekend where the CWHL and the NWHL both decided, hey, we're going to have our All-Star games this weekend, back to back. So, and of course, there had to be a freaking blizzard. So I ended up having to leave Buffalo at like 6 a.m. because my original megabus got canceled. And then my bus home got canceled. So my parent had to come get me. And like, and then immediately after that was Buffalo's the very first NWHL All-Star game in Buffalo, which I was thrilled about. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that was such a fun weekend. You know, I got to go to Toronto, got to cover it at Air Canada. It was Air Canada Center. And then after that, I got to cover it in Buffalo in our home rink at Harper Center, and it was so fun. It was definitely, again, a little haphazard because it was the first go around.
A little bit haphazard. Okay, so in the first season, we did have captains. I have this Excel spreadsheet that I'm super proud of, which I will not show you. But okay, so 2016 is the official year. Buffalo, New York is the place amid a blizzard. There was like a little soiree one of the nights, but do we remember who the captains were for this? I mean, I know Maddie does, but does anyone else remember?
I'm pretty sure Hillary Knight was one of them.
That's correct.
I believe Emily Falzer was the other one.
Yeah, yep. Nailed it. Okay.
Yep.
Those were the captains. I'm not going to go through the full rosters, but hardest shot, fastest skater, breakaway challenge, fastest goalie, accuracy, all part. And there was a little bit of controversy. The aforementioned Hillary Knight in particular was quite put out because she did not realize, which is something I quite honestly have not seen in pro sports before, but that all of the individual competitions that I just mentioned, fastest shot, fastest skater, hardest shot, fastest goalie, those individual skills competitions would garner points that would carry over.
She was so mad.
She was hella pissed.
I remember that. She had this look on her face I'll never forget. Oh, yeah.
So Team Falzer was in the lead, and this is why. Because when it came to hardest shot, Team Falzer took that. I mean, I think we all know, right, who won hardest shot in the inaugural season? From the Buffalo Beauts.
Yeah, Megan Moser.
Megan Bozak. And I will have you know that not only did Megan Bozak win the hardest shot competition in the inaugural season for Team Falzer, but her highest speed, I guess, 88 miles per hour is the highest speed that was ever recorded for an NWHL/PHF All-Star Weekend. So she holds the record outright overall. And we'll get into some of those others as we go through.
Down the line.
Fastest skater. Oh, ski. You know, when I was like, her name is Devin. What? Devin who?
Devin Skeets. Oh my God. OG Buffalo Butte. One of those players that I was really excited to see, honestly, because I remember seeing her during training camp, and I was like, oh, this girl's fast. She's crafty. She can get around the net. And then she missed the first couple of games due to visa issues. But then once she got there, I mean, she was a solid player, solid depth player. And yeah, she had some wheels on her, I tell you what. So, yes, Ms. Devin Skeets.
Oh, Skeet, God damn. Listen, the Buffalo Buttes also gave us the amazing Tatiana Rafter, who was giving us in-game all-star interviews, which was fantastic.
Yes.
Skeets was a treasure. Not her IG content rivaled Ashlyn Harris. I love that. Also, I did not ever follow Devin Skeets, as far as I know, on social media. So I'm mad I missed it. I missed the.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I remember some of it.
I missed the golden era. Okay, but what else did we have? So Team Falzer won the breakaway challenge. Fastest goalie. I mean, Buffalo, pretty much, they crushed it. Fastest goalie, BMAC. Accuracy challenge, Stedman.
Kelly Stedman.
Until we get to season 2 accuracy, because that was amazing.
Still the all-time best performance ever in an accuracy challenge.
And you and I were there. We bunkered. We had a whole WoHo collective of us.
Oh my God! Let us wait until we get into that collective.
Yeah. Wait, just wait for it. Just you wait, as they sung in Hamilton. So skills competition, Team Falzer took it. And all of them points done rolled over. But then you had the goal scorers. Goal scorers in the All-Star weekend. Kelly Stedman ×2. Just like the 2 E's she has in her first name. Cheyenne Darkangelo, Devin Skeets, and Haley Williams. Again, did anyone else show up but the Buffalo Buttes?
We were hyped. They were hyped. They said we are going to put on a show for our hometown crowd.
In this house. Now, granted, the home crowd couldn't get there because they were snowed in. But the point is...
Listen. Details, okay?
Details. Do you remember who MVP was?
MVP? Oh, God. I don't think it was Steady. I think it was... No.
Go with your gut. It was Kelly Stedman.
It was Steady. Oh, shit.
Do the steady.
I mean, why did I doubt her? My car is only named for Kelly Stedman.
Oh man, yeah. I have a gif of me doing the steady in a Blake Bolden jersey, and it's my favorite thing ever.
I mean,
they were roommates in high school.
Not mad. Yeah, I like so many Buttes players from that era. Why do I claim to be a Boston fan?
She said, girl, never change your first answer. Girl.
Listen, okay, I've already been told I was wrong twice. I don't need to be.
Listen, it don't matter. Shooter's gonna shoot. That's what they say. All right, so that's a little fun nugget about the NWHL inaugural NWHL All-Star Weekend. Yes. We will go back to my handy dandy spreadsheet as we continue rolling on through.
I love that you have a spreadsheet. That is so fun.
Oh, well, I mean, once I started being on the broadcast, I, wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. Your girl went from fan to broadcaster.
I mean, that's all we can really ask for from our broadcasters. I wish some more of them did that, but
I can't speak.
I said it. You didn't say it. I said it.
For those people.
I said it. And I said what the hell I said. Anyway.
All right. So we talked a little bit about this, but Boston, late surge, late bloomer in season 1. I think Hillary Knight and Team Knight, they got their feelings hurt by Team Falzer, and we're like, oh, we not messing around no more. We don't know what points are going to roll over or not, so we about to just get in the table.
Dead. Oh my god.
I mean, these points might roll over, so I gotta win.
No, but really, that final had a little bit of controversy and drama behind it, because we talk about game 1 between Boston and Buffalo, and I believe Boston took an early lead. Buffalo came back, and then went to overtime, and a rare occurrence.
Yes. Okay, but wait, before we even get there, because we're gonna have to talk about who we know lovingly as Harrison Brown in just a minute, but that's the finals. I was gonna talk about an upset, pray tell, that happened in the semis.
Oh well, yeah.
This was the series. Connecticut hosting Buffalo
versus Buffalo,
2 and 3 seed. And again, how much of an upset is it when it's 2 versus 3? I mean, debatable. But what I do remember is that Connecticut won that first game, because this was my first series as a media member, because I
think they won that pretty handily, actually.
It was like a 2-goal, but so I remember that game because I had started following media members, like Beth was one of them, as I said before, and I just sometimes literally just DM them or email them and be like, hey, tell me all of the things, I want to know the things, because I'm just a curious person.
Yeah.
And Luis Sanchez, who calls Boston College hockey games, had an outlet, My W Sports, and I reached out, and throughout the season, he was like, hey, come on this podcast, write this story. I was like, bro, I don't do this. He's like, but you're fun and you're passionate and you're an athlete. You're a college athlete. It'll be fine. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'd join his podcast a few times. And then he reaches out because the semifinal series was Boston versus the Riveters. We talked about that a little bit. We don't really need to get into it anymore. That was a clean sweep. Okay, baby. And then it was the 3-game series that went the distance. Connecticut hosting the Buffalo Buttes, and he's like, listen, we can't cover both games, can you go to Connecticut for us? And I was like, bro, I don't even know what to do. He's like, no, it'll be fine, just talk to people and write down what they say. And I was like, all right, whatever. So my first ever interview, the one and only Kelly Babstock. Oh my gosh, hilarious.
Oh, Babs.
But what I remember about that series that I thought was really interesting is that Kelly Stedman, the aforementioned all-star MVP, Kelly Stedman, missed game 1, as did Megan Duggan, who was coaching at the time for Clarkson. And so the big thing was that in game 2 and particularly game 3, that the Buffalo Buttes had fresh legs in the way of Steady and Duggan, who literally, if I remember the story correctly, helicoptered.
Yeah.
Where the heck Clarkson is.
I don't know where she teleported her ass.
Yes. Evaporated.
Yes.
I don't know who paid for that thing. It was it was the Dunkin' Donuts helicopter. Cuppy was the pilot. I mean, I don't know. Because, okay, the inside joke there for anyone who's joining us and does not know, Dunkin', is it on here? No. Ooh, I have a pre-dunks. Anyway.
Dunkin' Donuts, for those of y'all who don't know, was the very first sponsor.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Emphasis on fresh.
Ah!
Oh, imagine those two being your fresh legs.
Right?
Exactly. Like, are you kidding me? So I know I said I was going to talk about it, but let's talk about it. The New York series, game 1, Boston 6-0. In game 1 for the Connecticut Buffalo series, 3, you were close. 3-0 Connecticut.
Yeah.
Game 2 for New York, Boston. Now this got all kinds of out of control. Poor Jenny Scrivens. I think even she got hurt or something. It was just wild. But the Riveters found the goal 4 times.
Yes.
It's just that Boston found it 7. So there you go. And then it was a 4-1 win in game 2 for Buffalo to extend their season.
Yes.
And then it was, heartbreaker, 4-3, Connecticut losing out after, for a majority of the season, being in the driver's seat. They fail to advance to the Isabel Cup final, which, as we will get into in multiple WoHo retros, was kind of their MO, even when it was only a 4-team league. I know. I'm so sorry, Shannon Doyle.
Dude, listen.
Facts are facts. Can
we officially classify her as like the Jim Marino of
I don't know who that is. So
Jim Marino is somebody who like made the Super Bowl multiple times with the Miami Dolphins and never won a Super Bowl.
Is that why the song says the Dolphins make me cry? Was he talking about the Miami Dolphins or like real dolphins? I don't know
what the hell you're talking about.
That's who's in the Blowfish.
Oh my god.
Such a baby, yeah, the Dolphins make me cry. And then they had, what's his name? Like super famous. He was in Ace Ventura. Marino, right? That's his name. Dan
Marino.
Dan Marino. Quarterback. I think so. Yeah, he was like in the music video. I was like, okay, anyway. I'm such a baby, yeah, the Dolphins baby. I think that's what he says. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, we're getting
imagine those not being the lyrics.
It very well could be. You know how you like think you know the lyrics and then you grow up and you're like, wait, what?
They were singing that the whole time? What?
The whole time?
The whole time? Shout out if anybody knows that reference. If anybody knows that reference.
The whole time?
The whole time? The whole time?
Our queens, Sally Fields, our queen.
Oh my god! Anyway,
I was like, "Girl, you got that bass."
Oh, that always made me laugh. That movie did not age well at all when you really think about it. But that
problematic. So
that reveal though, and her reaction.
Oh, so
prime acting. Prime acting.
Yes. Oh my god.
But yes. The final.
The final. Yes.
After
so that beat us up for Buffalo at well, not really at, we'll get to that. Buffalo versus Boston at New Jersey, who wasn't even in the league. You don't even go here. Like,
yes.
Go here. Like, what happened?
Yes. So that was I think that was kind of like the beginning of
what is it? The strategic alliance?
Yes, the strategic partnership between the Devils and NWHL teams.
Also, just the banner back, you cowards.
Yes, right. So
terrible tradition of out of market finals. Yeah.
We're
not even waiting till the finals to be out of market these days, but that's a whole nother story. I mean,
that wasn't even me this time.
Where's the lie?
No, none detected, but that wasn't even me this time. I'm just saying. I'm usually going to Petty University today.
Petty University. Okay.
Oh my god. Anyway, so
you were saying
the final.
Yeah.
Game 1. Boston ends up getting pushed to overtime and then catches probably the break of a lifetime when Hillary Knight gets taken down on a breakaway attempt, on what they deemed was a breakaway attempt, and is awarded a penalty shot. And as we all know, Hillary Knight may be many things, but somebody who misses the net often is not one of them.
True.
And she put it away. And that, I still stand by that being the defining moment of that cup final.
Oof. Okay, so break it down for us because there were a few things that happened in that final.
Right.
You talked about the breakaway, but then there was also what happened in the crease. That was that same final.
Oh, goodness. I think I remember. Yeah, because there was a goal that was disallowed. Yes, I remember this. There was a goal that was disallowed. Goals being disallowed for crease violations.
It wasn't disallowed because I remember this because Brown, we'll just say the player for the Buttes, Harrison Brown,
Yes,
is a skater, not a goalie. And so if a skater covers the puck in the crease,
right,
then that is a penalty shot. So I remember that being a part of this Isabel Cup finals.
You might be right. I try to block that out because I just remember it being one of those things. I was watching it I was in Ottawa at this point, because I was covering the Clarkson Cup, on behalf of, I don't remember if this was for the Victory Press or if this was for Watch This Hockey, which is where I started my coverage.
Wow.
But either way, I was in Ottawa with Zoe Hayden. We're sitting in an apartment after watching, after going to practice and watching Le Canadien and the Calgary Inferno. Oh, no, that's right. I was covering it for Matchsticks and Gasoline. Now I remember. But anyway, we were in Ottawa in an Airbnb watching this all go down. And either way, Hillary Knight gets awarded the penalty shot. She's the one who takes it. And again, it kind of took the air out of Buffalo's tires completely. I think Buffalo was in that situation. The Buttes were like, listen, we didn't do the best we possibly could during the regular season, but hey, we knocked out one of the top seeds. We're feeling really good. We are, we have Boston on the ropes now. And then boom. It's something that really, really changed the trajectory of that final. And from then on, Boston kind of ran away with it.
Yep. The scores ultimately were, let me just pull these up. The first game went to overtime. That was a 4-3 game. And then it was a 3-1 victory the next day. So it was back-to-back games. Yes. And I remember, so my first ever Riveters jersey had just come in. I know on social media, some people pointed out the merch and how bad merch.
The first, I don't think that the merch was ever really where it needed to be, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think the quality was best in season 1, but so not only did the quality get worse, but also they never got better with actually getting the merch to you. So anyway, whole nother story. So I finally get my jersey. I'm wearing it. Or I had it with me because I did cover that game, so I didn't wear it. I was like, I know enough to do that. But when we left, I wanted to wear it and have a picture outside the arena because I'm like, okay, first season over. And we happened to run into my sister and I, Megan Bozick, and I'm talking to her and I'm like, hey, sorry how it went down, but really loved watching you this season. She's like, it was all very fresh. So she was as nice as she could be and completely understood. And then I forget what happened. I think I must have said something else. And then she's like, but hey, what's up with that jersey? I was like, oh, wow. Wow. Okay. All right. But I kind of like chirpers. There's a whole there's a whole story behind how I became a Megan Fartelman fan, which is such a deep cut. And we I love this. I got my first Caps jersey as a Christmas gift. Got my first Riveters jersey for $15. That's a steal.
Wow.
$15 on eBay. I have so much
I believe 2015 or 2016 may have been the year that I actually got like vintage, like old logo Minnesota Whitecaps before, like pre NWHL
cool.
Minnesota Whitecaps shirt. I still have it.
I love that. You mentioned the Whitecaps, and Daisy, one of the first things when she popped in, said that her first, or I think she said on social media, on Twitter, that her first NWHL game was actually an exhibition that the Riveters hosted the Whitecaps. And I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I had known enough to know to like get into it then. I would have loved to see that.
If there's one team that I really hope that their history is preserved, I hope every team's history is preserved. I mean, that's what I want. That's what they deserve. But especially the Whitecaps, because the Whitecaps predate all of this. The Whitecaps have been around since the mid 2000s, mid to late 2000s, founded by Jack Brote, who was a part of the team, a huge part of the team up until I believe 2022. He was a co-head coach. He was president of the organization. I remember vividly talking to him about the history, talking to him about, him just wanting his daughters to be able to have a place to play. Talking about, where they started. They're still the one women's hockey team to win both a Clarkson Cup and an Isabel Cup.
By way of the Seattle franchise. We talked about that on our last stream.
Yes.
I agree with you. And I put in the chat the link because I specifically asked Lee Steckline about that. And you have to remember that the way that the Whitecaps won the Clarkson Cup was that effectively, kind of like we saw in the NHL for a time, you like could challenge the champion. So they were not in the league,
right?
But they were able to compete, and then it's like the contender, and they won. So they weren't invited. Like, you can't sit with us. We're just gonna keep rolling out the movie references. You can't sit with us. Weren't invited to the CWHL. We're late to the party for the NWHL, but are the only team, as you mentioned, to win in both.
I will say that, they kind of were in talks with both entities at one point, because I did make it a point to ask Jack about this, and they were weighing their options. At this point, being part of a CWHL team, it was kind of almost like a pay-to-play situation. And the Whitecaps didn't necessarily know that they wanted to get put in that situation where, it's not necessarily a fully professional, because it is professional in the way that, athletes are expected to handle themselves.
Well, we don't have to sugarcoat it, because, Sarah Nurse, and I love this quote, she was like, listen, we got tired of pretending to be professional. And I was like, girl.
Fair. So, it wasn't necessarily a professional setup, whereas the NWHL, now, PHF, was paying its players, and they were building toward a more professional setup and a more professional business model. And that's why Minnesota eventually became part of the NWHL in 2019, which 2018, 2019, first expansion team. Yes. But yes, they do.
The All-Star prior to that. We'll get to that.
They did. We'll get to that. That's season 2 lore. But season 3?
Season 2 was in Pittsburgh.
Season 2 was in Pittsburgh. You're right. Season 3. Yes. I'm thinking because season 2 is 2017, 2018. You're right. Season 3. Again, 2018, big blur. But with that being said, yes, they were originally part of the WWHL, the Western Women's Hockey League, which folded and essentially had 2 teams. I believe it was the Calgary team that ended up getting folded into the CWHL. And then Minnesota at that point was just on their own, and they took to barnstorming, and they were barnstorming up until they joined forces with the NWHL. And
Yep.
again, huge, rich, amazing history, very strong roots in the community, really strong roots in the state of Minnesota. And
yeah,
that's the question that we're all asking, Manuel,
exactly.
is will the Whitecaps franchise be in the PWHL? At this point, we don't know. It would break my heart not to see that branding and not to see that.
Well, who owns it, I think, is the question, because if the PHF owned it and they were bought out, then doesn't the PWHL ownership group own it?
So the Whitecaps and the Buttes were both owned by the same ownership group, NLTT Ventures. That's the one thing that I think we need to remember, is that at that point, the PHF were technically independently owned, although we can talk about the ownership groups at a later time. But if it does turn out that the owners did hand over those rights and hand over that branding, I don't see why the PWHL wouldn't do something with it. Because again,
I could, but that's a whole other story.
Listen, I know I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of preserving history, because again, that's again the point of this entire endeavor that we're trying to undertake.
Yeah, I mean, so to answer the question though, we don't know.
We really don't know.
I mean, it's been reported though that they're not going to carry any of that over, but again, if I understand what's happening, and the ownership group, sure, but again, the way I understand it is that some of the assets of the PHF were bought by the PWHL, so we don't know what those are. I've asked, they won't tell. They also won't explain why you would buy something that you're not going to use, but I mean, you can use your business 101 brain that the egg faces always on Twitter try to tell me about to figure that out. No, the mundane details. Oh, God.
That goddamn quote. Oh my God.
I mean, quote. He said it, so I don't know.
Listen, at the end of the day, I'm trying so hard, especially this week with the signings and with, as we get closer to the draft, I'm trying so hard not to say things in a way that is, how do I want to put this? Because I think that ultimately, when it comes to the history, this is a very fraught topic. Because again, like we've said in previous streams, I think we said it in the last stream, there's a lot of history that tends to it's almost like a VHS tape that you keep using. You rewind it and you overwrite everything that was recorded. And that's not what I want to happen here. I want it to be preserved. I want it to be something that is acknowledged, even if you then say, I want to move on from this chapter. That's fine. Any good, any good business, any good league, any good entity, or any entity that is at least competent will want to acknowledge their past and then move on from it and improve upon what was done before. I completely understand that. I'm trying really, really hard not to come down too hard on some of the choices, because ultimately, again, there's a lot that we still don't know. But I don't understand why they're so keen to kind of throw away not even just 8 years, but 20 to 30 years of what has been grown. Because again, the Whitecaps predate these leagues. Mm-hmm. So it's very frustrating and it's very disheartening as somebody who has been there, as somebody who has seen the growth, we're talking about it right now. We both witnessed it.
Yeah. Exactly. And so to answer the question, we addressed this on our last live stream, but no, we will not be changing our name. The Founding Four stays. Mike and I talked about that even as expansion happened, but just like the NHL never gets rid of the original six, we're not getting rid of the Founding Four. It's retro, it's vintage now, which is fine but we're
Yes.
sticking with it. We're sticking to it. So yeah, we're gonna be around,
Yes,
but
we are.
we're gonna. I think we did pretty good for season 1.
Yep.
Just to circle back to the graphic. So remember, Dunkin' Donuts first ever partner, Megan Duggan, was a massive part of that marketing
Have we
plan,
talked about the
not
graphic?
just for the NWHL, but also for USA Hockey. The donut was a throwback to Janine Weber, who was seen with a massive donut on the bench at the All-Star weekend. Also,
Yes.
basically wolfed down a burger while they went to a game. Was it an Islanders game or a Rangers game? I think it was a Rangers game.
I don't remember.
So that was that reference. And then Hillary Knight, yes, she did play in the NWHL. I mean, I just thought it was so funny that there were people who covered the PHF who were like, wait, Hillary Knight played for the Boston Pride, which speaks to like so many problems, including that leagues beforehand have not done a good job curating the history, which is exactly why, as a broadcaster, I took it upon myself. And I'm not a spreadsheet girl. Like, I don't do spreadsheets, but I did for this because I needed to know the history. And so, yeah. But and then we didn't even get to this. We talked about All-Star Weekend, but Kaylee Fratkin and the chicken head.
The damn chicken head. Also, Jamie Leonoff and her freaking aviators and like handlebar stash. I think she was trying to be a 70s cop.
Mrs. Officer, Mrs. Officer.
But that was the first inklings that we saw of NWHL players trying to bring some levity, trying to bring some fun into the All-Star game. It was so fun. That was all during the breakaway challenge. I remember seeing Kaylee Fratkin with that damn chicken head and being like, what the hell? There was that. And then we didn't even get to touch on the graphic, so I will do that now. As the Isabel Cup final drew to a close, the NWHL dropped a very interesting tidbit with that then kind of became...
I wasn't even talking... I was talking about our graphic, but yes, the graphic.
Well, you said graphic and my wheels started turning. So...
Who was it? Alyssa that posted that recently?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll end the stream with how the NWHL ended season 1, which is the graphic.
The graphic. I remember this clear as day because Zoe and I literally started screaming. So with the end of the stream for the Isabel Cup final was a graphic of the United States and Canada with there are these little flags detailing the founding 4 teams: Boston, Buffalo, Connecticut, New York. And then there were 2 more. One in Toronto, one in Montreal. And that became the topic of conversation in the women's hockey sphere.
Mad. People were big mad.
Days upon days upon days afterwards.
We're still talking about it.
Well, I mean, we still are, but it is just such an interesting harbinger of what was to come in seasons ahead. And again, we're not going to get there just yet, but it was very, very... It was a shock. It was a huge shock to see something like that. Basically, the NWHL staking claims to cities where there are already CWHL teams.
Drama. And
the absolute shitstorm that resulted from that. But yes, it was very much.
They were really.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though. That's exactly what I'm talking about. They really were They were really like looking into that crystal ball and being like, "Yep, those 2." So
that makes sense. Every women's league has had teams in those markets. I think. Yeah. I just, as someone who knew nothing about the history of women's hockey before this season 1 of the NWHL, I was like, whoa. And I should have known then. If a smarter mind would have been like, girl, you in danger, girl. But I stuck around for whatever reason, even though I was like, this makes no sense. Like, I know there's another league, but like, why are we mad?
I mean,
why are
ultimately,
you so mad?
it's a whole territory thing. It's a territory thing. I think that ultimately, as somebody who I've watched hockey since I was 14 years old, and this has always been a kind of thing where a lot of there are certain groups of people who watch this sport who are incredibly territorial over what they feel is their sport. And the idea was already kind of in minds that this was an upstart league that was challenging an established league. And then funny enough, that flipped in 2019, but we'll get there. But there was this upstart league trying to encroach on territory that wasn't theirs. And to me, that flies in the face of growing the game. First of all, we always want to talk about that. Those three words are like seared into my brain just from seasons 1 and 2 alone, of growing the game and growing the sport and, being there for the little girls in the stands. That was such a big part of it. And naturally, if you think of something like the NWHL, you're going to want to expand at some point, and you're going to want to expand to markets that are established and markets that you stand to do well in. And, a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people saw that as a threat. And I mean, it goes back to what Daisy was saying, that it wasn't necessarily an announcement. It was more like shots fired.
That's how it was taken. Yeah.
Take that as you will. I saw it as, the NWHL is looking to expand. And I mean, if it does end up, my thing is, if you're that threatened, then what is going wrong with your league? And we could say that
I even thought into that. Honestly, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense.
I mean,
but I think it's worth noting that Canada was a part of Britain longer than the US, and so there's that. I'm just going to chalk it up to that, because
I didn't think that then. I'm not saying I thought that then, but I'm thinking it now. Like, looking back, hindsight's 2020, obviously. But it's just like a situation that I feel got so yes, and we'll get there. Trust me, we'll get there. And I think that was what the Take the Ice documentary really kind of highlighted, was kind of this disconnect, right? This disconnect between what the front office was trying to do and the vision that Danny Ryland had, and the reality of the situation, right?
Is that okay? No, I'm not going to fire any more shots tonight. I'm going to holster the gun. Oh, that's an interesting take. I'll say that.
Girl, say what the hell you got to say. I don't care. It's me.
I mean, and however many people are watching the stream, I don't know. I think that's an interesting take. I think women's hockey continues to be the longest running, most dramatic novella I have ever watched and been a part of in my life.
Yes, this is true. This is true. I'm not going to sit here and argue that.
But I think as we land the plane, yes, Madison, you nailed it. The beginning of shots fired, ... as they say in Mamma Mia. Then mid-season 2 happened. Was it even really mid-season? It was like
December.
It was like October. I don't know. It was
it was winter. I remember it being close to like spring.
That drama for your mama is all that we get to talk about for the next 7 seasons of the NWHL/PHF, which I still don't understand why they rebranded. But now they don't exist anymore. We will bring you all of that in the coming weeks right here on the Founding Four podcast as part of Black Rosie Media. Thank you so much for joining us. I am terrible at doing this, but just a reminder for all of the rest of our live streams in particular, we now are monetized. Our YouTube channel is monetized, so you can do super chats. We're not no super chats for tonight. Don't worry about it. But for our next ones, and like I said, I'm going to try to line up some guests. We'll get into those super chats, which of course just helps us do more great things. But Make sure you follow the Ice Garden. I was a founding writer there. Mike, of course, was a
As was
writer
I.
there. He is a founder and will always be a part of, in any way he chooses, the Founding Four podcast. So check out the Ice Garden. Also, of course, Black Rosie Media. And I was able to talk to a lot of players today, individually, one-on-one. And so you'll see a little bit of that in the Locked On NHL Women's Hockey Spotlight, showing up tomorrow, Friday, on all places you can find the Locked On NHL podcast. We're trying to really carve out some space for women's hockey there. So I would appreciate if y'all can listen, subscribe, comment, all of the things.
Absolutely.
But that's going to do it for this WoHo Retro Season 1 of the National Women's Hockey League. We'll let you know when we go live again to talk about season numero dos. All right, folks, for Angelica Rodriguez, my name is Erica L. Ayala, and we are your co-hosts of the Founding Four podcast. We're two Latinas with spicy hockey takes.
They're about to get spicier.
Yes. Hold it for the next live stream. We will let you know. Oh gosh, All-Star game. We got to talk more about that. All-Star. First of all, when we get to season 3 and the All-Star game, I probably blocked a lot of that out because, yes, trauma. But we'll get to all of that. Thank you. Have a beautiful night, and we'll catch you on the next live stream. Peace out. Bye-bye.